Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Principles of Business marathon. And I know that this is the first in a series. We'll be having subsequent marathons leading up to our examination in May. My name is Patroy Montague, and I'm your tutor. And we will be basically looking primarily at the preparation for exam as it relates to principles of business. And then we are going to be going into some questions as it relates to both papers, right? So first I'm going to be looking at some guidelines that we need to observe to ensure that we are successful in the exam. It's not just knowing the content, it's how you approach the exam that makes the difference. These techniques and principles are critical to the success. There are persons who are well informed, know their content, they go in the exam and did not, manipulate the situation or maneuver very well. And as a result of that, they come out knowing what was on the paper, but because of circumstances and how they maneuver, it was not a good experience for them. So we want to minimize that or eliminate that as best as possible. And that is why we have these marathons, to cover content and to ensure that we have the right attitude and aptitude for the exam, right? So for the next, well, for this session, we are going to be going through some multiple choice. We are going to be looking at some structured questions, and we are also going to be kicking off, by the way, by looking at some tips, right? So you are free to provide your feedback. And in fact, I am hoping that it will be somewhat interactive. You know, type in the chat and we can get coverage for the information as best as possible. All right. So I'm going to be going to, first of all, let me share my screen. All right, so exam techniques. So it's all good to know your content and to know what is the answer for questions. But it is also good to ensure that you understand the nature of the question, and so you can leverage the paper itself, maximize the time and efficiency. All right, so as you note that the exam carries 3 papers, right? And by and large, I'm going to be focusing on papers 1 and 2 for today. The paper 3-1, which is the SB, and the paper 3-2, which is an alternative school-based assessment. In other words, that is really an SBA, but you set it in an exam setting. It's under test conditions, right? So we'll not be focusing on any of the paper 3 today per se, right? But you need to note, first of all, that your paper 1, which is a multiple choice, consists of 60 test items. Some persons call it questions, but they are not always questions, right? It can be a statement which asks you to respond to something. So there are 60 test items. And 20 items are pulled from each profile. You have 3 profiles or 3 groups of topic. Organizational principles is the first group, or what we call profile. The second group, promotion and logistics. And the final is finance, government, and technology, right? So these are the 3 groups of topics that your questions will be pulled from, right? And if you want to have an idea of what they look like, let me just come down a bit. So on the organizational principle, which is the first group, we cover things like nature of business. Of course, that deals with how business began, forms of business, economic systems, internal organizational environment, which looks at how the various forms of business, the management structure, so to speak, of businesses, and ownership per se, private, public sector entities, and leadership that drives business. You also look at establishing a business, which is part of what we call entrepreneurship, right? And also legal aspect of business. Formerly, this was referred to as contracts, right? So you look at, you know, all the legalities surrounding the exchange of goods and services, or, any dealings per se between the, whether it's the employer and the employee, the customer and the business, that sort of thing. All right. The second group looks at promotion logistics. We talk about production itself. You look at forms of production, right? You look at types and levels of production. You look at marketing, which involves the 4 Ps, so to speak, your product or your price, the place, which is where you're going to position your products to be sold. And you also look at promotion, which is advertising the product. Then you look at logistics and supply chain, the whole distribution channel as to how you get your goods to the, how you move your goods from the producer to the end user, or what we call the consumer. Then the final set of topics surrounds finance, which is the intermediary, which is your financial institutions, not just bank, but insurance as well, which is critical to business. You also look at government, and of course, government sets the framework, the legal framework in which business exists, taxation, and all of those. So, and their role in the economy. Then you look at technology and global business environment. All right. So that should close out the topics that we cover, the three groups that we call profile, right? So now you understand the profile. So from paper 1, we are saying you have an hour and 15 minutes, right? It means, therefore, to cover 60 items, you have little over a minute per question, right? And what we want you to understand is that if you spend 3 to 5 minutes on a particular question, it means, therefore, that you're going to be in problem with the other questions. You're going to run out of time, and you might have to just go through and you don't really want to be doing that for more than, say, probably 10% of your paper. You want to ensure that whatever you have put as your response, it is thought through, right? So you want to ensure that that takes place. Now, in your paper 2, you have 5 questions that you have to do, right? They are compulsory that you do 5 questions. In section A, you do 3 questions, and in, section 1, right, you do 3 questions. All of those must be done. In section 2, you choose one of 2, and you do the same in section 3, right? So, and the questions cover all 3 profiles, all right? Now, you have 5 questions, and each question is valued 20 marks, right? Which means that the paper is marked out of 100. You have 2 hours in which to complete those 5 questions. Now, what that means is that you have somewhere under 30 minutes Well, not just under. I would say just a shade over 20 minutes per question, right? Now, why am I saying this? It means, therefore, that there are some things that we have to pay attention to maximize the time. You know your stuff. If you overwrite on any question, you're going to be in trouble. So you answer one question very well, you get 100, you'll get the full 20 marks for that question. But at the end, you don't have the time to do the others because you overstay your time on a particular question. You misinterpret or you did not pay attention to some little techniques. And this brings me to the point where for your questions on paper 2, and I'm going to go back to paper 1 shortly, but for your questions on paper 2, I want you to first of all pay attention to the marks that are allotted per item or per question, right? If you have 2 marks, we don't expect that you are going to write half a page for 2 marks. Be guided by your marks. That's the first thing. Look at the action verbs that are included in the questions. So if you're asked to state or list something, then it should not be a discussion. Because if you discuss, yes, you might get the marks for it, but it deprives you of the time, valuable time that you need to answer another question. And certainly, you might very well run out of time, not being able to complete the amount of questions you should have done, right? So it is very important that you pay attention to the verbs. A verb that asks you to list 4 characteristics should not end up in an essay. You're asked to list. And by the way, when you're asked to list, on average, to list 1 item is 1 mark. So if you're asked to list 4 items, normally you get a mark per item, which should be above 4 marks. You're asked to define a term. Most times the term that you're defining is between 2, the maximum 3 marks, right? So you be guided by those verbs and also the mark. Don't overwrite, because you overwrite on a particular question, you're in trouble with the people, because some questions, they are going to cause you to have to go back deep in memory space before you can respond, or read again to see if you understand the questions carefully. So maximizing your time is very, very important, right? Please note that the times that we are talking about, just over 20 minutes, is inclusive of reading time. Some questions you have to read them twice, which can take you over a minute or 2 to read, right? And then you need to respond. So be guided by those. So list, state, outline, those are low order and normally carries less marks and require you to write less. Discuss, explain, those are higher order verbs which require you to give a little more. They are application type verbs, right? So you're asked to know, based on the knowledge you have, apply. So we want you to pay attention to these. These techniques are critical to support you knowing your content, right? For paper 1, as I was saying, having 60 items, you have 1 hour and 15 minutes, or translating that to minutes, you have 75 minutes to answer, to do the paper, which means that you have little over a minute per item. Now, when you read a multiple choice question, there are some of them that you The very look you look at it, the answer is there jumping out at you. Once you are absolutely certain of the answer, don't spend time to entertain yourself to see, let me see what other suggestions they are putting there. Right? You are sure that this is the answer? Go ahead, get it out of the way and move to something else. Because there are other questions that are going to require you deeper thought process. Reading it more than once, going through the elimination process, which is going to push you 2 and 3 minutes. Right? So please maximize your time. You read a question, you are certain of the answer, put it away and move to something else. Because you need to utilize the time wisely. Yes, so, and again, for paper 2, please ensure that when you take up your paper 2 and you scan the paper, that's the first thing you do. Scan the paper. Please do the easier questions first. Right? There's a mental process that follows. Once you put away a question and you're confident that you have done a question, it helps to clear the mind so that you can think more clearly for the rest of the people. But if you tackle the more difficult questions first and you are thrown off by that first question, it could throw you off for the rest of the people. It could just block your thought process and cause you to, either reduce the mark that you can get, the difference between a 1 and a 2, or the difference between being successful on the exam and not being successful, right? So please ensure that we stick to these guidelines as best as possible and ensure that along with, understanding your content and knowing it, that you apply the techniques, and together you will have a successful paper. All right? I think we will get back to all right, just shortly on the SBA. Of course, the SBA is predominantly a research process, right? So you would get a topic, and that is part of the syllabus, where you select a particular topic that relates to business itself, and you do your research following the steps and guideline that is outlined there. The information is on the CXC page. I think it's CXC Cognate, Business Cognate, I think that's the name of it. And it shows you a step-by-step process and example of each section, right? So persons who need additional information can get in touch with either Mr. Hudson or myself, and I can or contact Mr. Hudson, and then he will relay the message to me, and we can take it from there. All right? Okay, so that's the SBA in a nutshell, right? All right, so we are going to be looking at, let me stop sharing this screen. I'm going to be looking at one question, paper 2 question, and then we are going to, and I'm going to be asking for your participation in the items, and then we are going to move, after we have completed the feedback on this question, then we are going to move into 10 MCQs. Then we are coming back to paper 2. So that's how we are going to rotate them to, sort of not having it so monotonous. All right. So I'm craving your indulgence in the process. Let me stop sharing here. So I'm going to be sharing again. Okay, so this is drawn from I think it's 2016 paper, 20, or 2018, right? And this question focuses on predominantly each question carries a particular topic, right? Very rarely you find that two topics converge on a particular question. So we're going to be looking here at economic systems, and this is part of the first profile, nature of business, right? So this is what we are asked to define each of the following terms. Traditional economic systems, I want you to make a note of it. Planned economic systems, right? And see, we have it here, even though I retype this. So define each of the following. And of course, each term that you're defining is 2 marks. And that's what I stated before, right? So to define these, we don't expect you to have 5, 6 lines. Between 3 and 4 maximum, anywhere between 2 to 4 lines per definition, that should be sufficient, right? So you don't need to be writing half of the paper. And when you have almost half of the time elapsed for the exam, you're just completing question 1, right? Because, of course, this is a lower order question. Define. Some are going to ask you to explain, to discuss, which is going to require more information from you, right? So please ensure that you move along that path. All right, so we are asked to define traditional economic systems, planned economic systems. Then we are asked to state 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages of mixed economic systems, which is a third system, right? So here you're seeing state, which is a low order requirement. You state 2 advantage, and that's 2 marks. Because if you state 2 advantage and 2 disadvantage and you obtain 4 marks, it means that it is 2 marks for 2 advantage, or 1 mark per advantage, right? And 1 mark per disadvantage. So you want to ensure that you keep your writing as concise but adequate, right? Then we are asked here to outline 3 ways in which a business could fulfill its role to government. 3 ways. So if you're outlining 3 and you're getting 6, it means that for each, you're getting 2 marks, right? So you're being guided again by your marks. So outline is also a low order. So it does not require a lot of writing, right? Good. So we're setting the foundation for answering our questions, right? Explain 1. Now you're going to explain just 1 and look at the marks you're going to be getting. one way in which each of the following stakeholder contribute. So for one stakeholder that contribute that you're going to explain, right? It means you're getting 3 marks because there are 2 stakeholders here, the business owner, the employees. And if you're explaining one way for each, it means that you're getting 3 marks per stakeholder, which means that explaining is a little higher than these lower order, right? Still not as high as discuss, right? And or differentiate or that sort of thing, right? But still higher than stating and listing. Good? So be guided by those marks. So you're asked to explain one for each item and it gives you 6 marks. It therefore means that it's 3 marks. Why am I emphasizing this? You are to be guided by your marks when you're writing. Pay attention to those verbs as well as your mark. Explain, outline, state, define. Pay attention to them and look at the marks, right? Okay, so we are going to be looking at some possible responses, right? So let me go down here. So we are looking at economic systems, question 1. All right, so we define each of the following terms. And we should note as well that traditional economic system is the same as subsistence, right? And remember, you would have looked at the fact that persons started off business just providing for their direct needs. It was not a situation where persons produced sufficient to trade. So I plan probably 2 root of cane because that is sufficient for me, right? But if I need to trade, then I probably need to do 15, 20 so that I can have for my personal consumption as well as to exchange so that I can get some form of commodity in exchange for the cane that I am giving, right? So traditional economic system is the same as a subsistence where we had persons just hunting, probably indulging in their backyard farming or producing just for themselves, right? So this is featured, it says, by direct production to satisfy needs, and it is for self-survival, just for your own. Now, these were decided by individuals, so it is not that persons were ordering chicken, so they are providing chicken for them, right? Persons provided what they wanted for themselves. So they feel like they would eat some cabbage, they planted cabbage for themselves, right? They feel like they want to eat a piece of yam, they planted the yam for themselves, that sort of thing, right? It's not what people demanded, it's for their personal survival or satisfying their own need. So it was decided by them in terms of the quantity, and it was not, as we say, in surplus portion for exchange, all right? So that should be sufficient for 2 marks, right? You don't need a lot more than that if you want to add another sentence. Yeah, but we want to maximize the time. Planned economic system. And by the way, the traditional economic system was the earliest form that existed before we have monetary exchange and these economic systems that were determined by different individuals, right? Now, planned economic system, otherwise called command, controlled, communist, socialist, all of these terminologies. It's an economic system where all economic decisions are made by government, right? It is planned, meaning the government decides, right? They decide. What they decide? They decide what will be produced, how it will be produced, and how it will be allocated to customers. So, two examples of planned economic system that operate, two countries that are operating that way. You have Cuba, you have Russia, or it was USSR at one point. You have China, you have North Korea, and there are some other countries that operate in that same manner. Any country you see that does not have an election system that includes democracy, you question whether or not that's democracy in how they elect. It's an indication that what they practice is planned economic system, right? So it's not so much that the people decide. Their planning is centralized at government, right? So they decide what will be produced. So you will notice that, for example, North Korea, they produces nuclear weapon, right? And there are some countries who don't produce nuclear weapon. And you might say, well, North Korea seems to have a lot of money. But there are other sacrifices or other areas that needs funds to be allocated to. But they decide that that's not what they are focusing on. They decide that they are focusing on nuclear weapon. While there are persons who might be hungry. You have persons who are living in certain areas that are underdeveloped that needs government intervention in terms of infrastructure, roads, transport, and all of these things. But they decide that they are not focusing on that. What they are focusing on is primarily nuclear weapons. And as a result, other things are being sidelined. So they decide what will be produced, right? How they will produce it, they might decide that, okay, we are going to use primarily labor-intensive production. So we use a lot of persons to produce it rather than using a lot of technology and automation, right? So they decide how it will be produced. And after these items are produced, how it will be allocated, who gets what, and how much of each does, persons receive. Now, one thing in the communist or planned economic system is that they would have decided, of course, to use what is called a quota system. So you access a certain amount of the item, just as how I always use this analogy, just as how your debit card at the machine, you can only get a certain amount per transaction is the same way the system is for most communist countries, right? Or those who are still purely communist. You are limited. There's a quota, right? So that's basically how the planned economic system works. And of course, this information that is here is adequate for your 2 marks again, right? Was just trying to give you a little background on that, all right? Good. Now, the next question we are answering, that we are to state 2 advantages and also 2 disadvantages of mixed economic system, right? All right, so we did not define mix earlier. What we defined was traditional and we defined plan. Now, in order for us to appreciate the mixed economic system, there's another economic system that we have to look at before we understand the mix. Free, or what we call laissez-faire, and the laissez-faire is a French term, which means, less regulation, or it's a system where the government or management style does not really control. They allow the followers, or those who they are supervising, or those who they are leading, to be free to operate, right? So the free or the laissez-faire economic system is where the government does not really have much control. It's controlled mainly by private individuals, right? And in this economic system, it is market mechanism which determines how goods and services are allocated. So in the planned, the government decides. In the free, it's basically set on autopilot to run on its own course. So demand and supply, which is the market mechanism that determines how goods and services are traded, right? So once you have your money, you are free to buy as much. If you want to buy 5 motor vehicles and park them in your yard, it's up to you, right? If you want to purchase all the lands once you have your money in a particular area, it's up to you. That's how the free system operates. In the planned economic system, it doesn't work like that. The government decides how the items will be allocated. So it's the opposite of the planned economic system, right? So you will notice then that the persons who are wealthy will manipulate the free economic system, right? So you have what is called uneven distribution of income. Some people have a lot of money and some people have little or no money whatsoever, right? Same way with resources, right? Some persons have 5 vehicles, one to drive to work, one to sport in, one to for formal occasion, while some persons can't even afford to go on a public transport. Uneven distribution of wealth, right? So those are the 2 systems that are outside of the mix. Now, when you combine a little of both of the free market and a little of the planned economic system, you get what is called the mixed economic system, right? So you have some government intervention. The set some amount of regulations in place, right? But they still allow, to a greater extent, demand and supply to drive the market. But of course, they do some regulation, price controls, and have some oversight responsibility to have like agencies to ensure that the quality goods are being, and fair trading takes place, that sort of thing, right? So that was a little backdrop to this question. So now we understand the mix, a little of planned, a little of free market. So let us see if we can go into it now. So state two advantages and two disadvantages of the mixed economic system. And for two advantages, 2 marks. For two disadvantages, another 2 marks. In total, 4 marks, right? So advantage, and I just highlighting, you can expand as much, just highlighting 2. It says that the government provides, for advantage, the government provides public goods that private sector will not provide. What do we mean by that? For example, we're talking about, just for you to understand the answer itself, for example, security. That's a service that we all benefit from. The police service, right? There are other social services that we benefit from. Those are not things that business persons would go in. So for example, you have the fire service, right? When buildings or property is being destroyed by fire, you have the fire personnel that will come in. No private person will open up any such a business to provide that service. It's going to be provided, of course, by government, who through taxation will be able to, cover the expenses to provide the service, right? So government provide public goods, which are these services and others that private sector would not provide. The state also regulates activities while allowing latitude for creativity and efficiency. And that's what I alluded to earlier, that they will set some regulations in place to ensure that persons are doing fair trading and the trading practices are fair, that consumers are not being abused in the process, right? But they will not necessarily dictate every single thing, as in what you should produce, that sort of thing. You're free to get in whatever brand cell phone that you want to get to sell to the market, whatever brand of this, that sort of thing. Yeah, so those sort of creativity and also efficiency, it's up to the traders or players in the market to ensure that they maximize on that, all right? So for those 2 marks, and that should be good. All right, disadvantages. Government may seek to control private sector. Yeah, in some jurisdiction, depending on, the type of government, yeah, they can control some of these areas. And what you will find, if you find private companies being nationalized or government taking over certain entities, that can be an indication that government is flexing its muscle, and it could very well move to a sort of system that they are controlling, because one feature of a controlled economic system is that the government owns most of the resources. And you want to ensure that resources are even between private sector and the state, right? If government owns too much, then it can manipulate, right? Government investment can crowd out private sector investment. And that's another challenge that can find with mixed economy. So seeking to find the proper balance, and it's easy because government regulates fiscal and monetary policies, so they can increase business taxes and manipulate the environment in such a way that it becomes difficult for private sector to operate business. And once they do that, then what you find is that these businesses will close, and then it reduces the competition that government have in these particular industries. All right? So those should be sufficient in answering those questions. All right? Outline ways in which a business can fulfill its role to government. All right? So outline 3 ways, and for 3 ways, you're getting 6 marks. You just require to write a line per se or 2, right? So it is expected that each company pay its taxes when they're due, corporation tax and whatever other fees that they are expected to pay to maintain operation. They're expected to pay those, right? The corporation tax comes through profits that they would have made from operation, right? So those are directly taxed on their revenue, right? They are expected to collect. So when you sell and they charge GCT and whatever other type of business they do, and taxes, and remember, tax means government revenue. So any tax that is paid don't belong to anybody else. It belongs to government, right? The only tax is the transportation tax that passengers pay to taxi, and that belongs to those private persons. But all other taxes belong to government, right? So it's government revenue. So all GCT and all other tax for various transactions, you pay different type of tax. I think if you're transferring property, there's a certain tax that you pay, that's government. So all of these funds that are paid for government as tax, it is expected that they will collect these, and once collected, it should be paid over to government, right? That's indirect tax, right? So it was not taxed directly on their income. They collect it, and it is to be passed on to the various government agency, whether it's a revenue office or whatever office it is, right? Yes, if your employees, you take out their income tax and whatever tax, it is to be paid over to the relevant agencies as well, right? Another one that we can look at, and of course, as I said, you would put a little on this, abide by legal, safety, and registration regulations. So ensure that you operate with the requisite signs, depending on the type of industry or business that you're into. It might require that you have extra gears, signs, special machines, special tools to work with, right? These should be provided for the employees, right? And in so doing, you ensure that no one is injured, because that becomes a burden now on society, right? The more persons are sick, the more the public health system is taxed, right? So you want to ensure that you abide by these legal safety guidelines and also registration regulation, right? So you register as a business, the name that you have, you pay a fee for it as well. All of those must be duly registered, and what you register to operate um, as, that's what you should maintain. If you are going to be adding any other product, service, offering, then that it must be updated. Yes, it might require additional fee, but that must be updated, right? And the registrar of companies and the relevant authorities will decide whether or not, right? So you can't register to be an hardware and you're selling food. Nobody knows if you have food angler's permit and all of these things, but you're operating in that line. No, because that can cause other issues. Poorly prepared meal cause people to sick and all of those things when you don't have the requisite regulate, I should say, qualifications and competence to deal in those areas. So whatever you're registered to do, that's the confines in which you should operate. And so that's part of fulfilling the role to government. Abide by employment laws, right? Ensure that no one under the age of consent is being employed, child labor, that sort of thing, right? And once persons are employed, that they are duly paid. And once they are duly paid, it means therefore whatever is taken out for government will be handed over. Most time you find that when employees are not paid properly, then also the remittance to government is also in question, right? Because you would not necessarily give over to government something that you claim that you deduct from someone when you did not pay them, right? So yeah, you want to ensure that you abide by the employment laws. Persons are duly registered to work within a particular area. Yeah, you pay attention to that. And promote commerce and competition, right? That's another way that the business fulfill its role to government by ensuring that there's increased business activity where you can provide employment. The more you provide employment, the less social welfare allocation will have to be made. More persons are working, less persons are relying on government welfare to survive. Crime and violence is expected to be lower as a result. Business competition, lower prices, and purchasing power is increased as a result, right? So these are, so I've given you more than 3, and of course you can, write your little, so there's no right and wrong in terms of how you explain them per se. Just ensure that you justify them properly. All right? Okay. The fourth, D says explain one way in which each of the following stakeholder contribute to the success of a business. Now, explain one way in which each, and we have 2 stakeholders here, so each one will be 3 marks, all right? So the business owner, they provide capital for growth, right? That's one way. You can expand on that a little, probably 2 lines. Provide guidance and management. Of course, they direct, the operation and all of that. set strategic direction to the organization in terms of where you want to be, long-term plan, where the organization want to position itself in the next 3 to 5 years. They have that sort of strategic direction for the organization. Provide employment as well, right? So they provide employment for citizens so that more persons can receive an income. Ensure employees are compensated, right? If persons work, then they should be paid, right? So they ensure that. So these are some of the points. You were just asked to give one. I provided a few. So you can, and there are more. The list is not exhaustive, by the way. So employees now, what is their contribution to the success of the business? They carry out the tasks as directed. So the operational aspect of the business, the employees are the ones who carry out those, right? So if you are in the business of baking bread, then they are from supervisors to the direct laborers, right? They provide the operational direction. Being efficient in carrying out their tasks, right? So with skill and competence, right? And also knowledge. So if you have persons who cannot manage what they are doing, then it will be evident in the quality of goods and also services. You go some places to get some service and you find that the line is long and persons take a long time to get through. Sometimes it is as a result of the level of competence of the persons providing the service. Persons are not very adept at what they are doing. And as a result of that, the waiting time for each customer is lengthened. Whereas if you have somebody who is competent and mastering their area, then it makes a difference, right? And of course, they utilize skills and knowledge in the provision of goods and services, right? So normally when these persons are being employed, they say that they must have experience in this area. And of course, some are trained in a particular area, and these are what they trade. Employees trade their skills. They give their skills and they are paid for it, right? So this is what they trade in the provision of goods and service. All right, so that's one question. All right, I want to take a break from we are coming back to this, but I want to take a break here and I'm going to be looking at just about probably 10 multiple choice questions and then we come back to this other question, right? So I hope that you are following so far and you would have gotten a gist of how we answer, not just the content, but the background in terms of how you respond to questions with certain verbiage and the marks allotted. All right. So let me stop sharing this a minute and then I'm going to see if we can get some interaction in before we come to the next short answer question. Let me see here. All right, I'm going to ask you to take out your gadgets I'm going to ask you to take out your phones and gadgets. We are going to be doing a multiple choice in the form of a game, right? I'm going to ask you to type kahoot.it, and then I'll give you the game code. And these questions are multiple choice questions that I've placed here, right? All right, so your game pin is on screen. So you should type in kahoot.it, and then it will ask you for a game pin, and your game pin is on screen. Well, let me give another minute. Okay. Lovely. All right. Right. Good. 30 seconds more. All right, so we are going to begin, and I want you to read the questions and watch the timer. You have roughly 20 seconds to select, and these are in the format of multiple choice. These are multiple choice questions, right? So, all right, so we are going to begin now. First question coming up. Five seconds remaining. All right, I realized that nobody responded. Is it that we did not see the question? Nobody responded. I need to know what's happening. All right, so the answer here is barter. So it says country X pays for wheat from country Y with banana. So they exchange something, right? They wanted wheat from the other country, but they gave them banana instead. So it is saying the system of exchange can be described as it's not electronic transfer, it's not bill of lading, it's not a financial trade. Of course, it's barter. All right. Give me a second. Let me clarify what's happening. All right. So we're looking at the next question. Let me hope that right. Is that right here? All right. So we have this being. Give me a second. Let me stop share. Oh, share, share. All right, so we're moving to the next question. No, man, it's one person answer. Okay, so the question asks a situation where each party to trade, which meaning the person who is trading the items between each other, must have what each other wants, is best described as. So if I am going to give you banana and you are going to give me wheat, I should want your wheat and you should want my banana. If we don't have that sort of situation, right, then we have an issue. So we are saying that there must be what is called a double coincidence of one. Both persons must want what each other have. That's where you have the double coincidence of one. So that's the answer for this question, right? I noticed only one person responded. All right, I might need to clarify. When you're selecting the correct response, probably on your screen, it should be a color code, right? So A, red, B is blue, C is what you call this color now, I'm not sure. And D is green, right? So you select them based on what you have assigned here, all right? Let us see if we can improve on the next one, right? Hmm. Still not getting it. All right, so it is asking which is not a function of money, right? So we know the functions of money. Money's function as a store of value. Money is a measure of value as well. Money is also divisible. So if we are looking at which is not, it means that not divisible would be the answer because it's a measure of value, it's a store of value. So it means therefore that not divisible is not a function. If you notice, wanted to notice this, that not is in bold here. So in other words, the opposite of this statement is which is a function of money. The blue and the one in, should I call this yellow? Measure of value and store of value, they are functions of money. But which is not, which is the opposite now, would be the one that says it is not divisible. All right? So pay attention to these bold letters, both in the multiple choice and the paper two. Pay attention to those terms that are either in full cap or they are bold. All right? All right, let us see if we can. I'm still not clear as to why we're not having more persons responding. All right, next question. Next question. All right, this question asks, from which of the following commercial organization, right? And so we have to look at some things here by elimination. The central bank is not a commercial organization, right? Might any member of the public be allowed to purchase shares? So we rule out the central bank, right? Government agencies, you don't buy shares from government agencies. So it is left with cooperatives and private companies. But this term here, any member, private companies don't allow any member at all to purchase shares. It's only certain persons. When you come on to private companies, it's a selected group. So it's not open to the general public, right? So cooperatives satisfy best this answer because any member, or what we would call it, persons who are a part of this organization, they're allowed to purchase, right? So the answer would be cooperatives, right? All right, so we are going to look at the next question. All right. All right, it's a little better now. So we got 3 persons responding. Good. Right. So of course, which of the following practices are characteristics of free economy? And of course, we just spoke about it, that price fixing or control pricing is not part of the free economy system, right? Central planning, that's part of plan. So both price fixing and central planning is part of the plan. And also strong monitoring of market activities. Those are planned. But private ownership of factors, the private individual own most of the resources. This is where you have, of course, the free economy, or the laissez-faire, we want to call it. All right. So yes, at least one person would have remembered that. All right. But I like the improvement in the response, or the responses. All right. So we going down now. All right. So D is out in front. Let us see if we can catch up. Good. All right. So we have it a little better now. So which of the following is a function of a business unit or a business itself? Business does not exist to educate workers, right? It does not exist to regulate spending. In fact, if they can get you spend all of your money, that's what they would want. They do not exist to conduct surveys. So the answer really is they exist to produce goods and services, right? Right. That's why they exist. All right. All right. Yes. It's getting a little warm now. Good. All right, good. So we have 2 persons on target. Good. So in which department of a manufacturing business would you best likely find an engineer? So an engineer is not a person who deals with marketing. They do not deal with personnel, which is HR, right? You don't find them doing that. They would not be in the accounts department, which deals with financial. What they would deal with, of course, is production, right? They are making stuff, they are building stuff, right? So you would find them in the production department of a manufacturing business, all right? So that's where you would find the engineers, all right? All right, so it's getting warmer now. Love that. Okay. All right, so we have 3 more questions in this segment to go. Let's see how much we can address these. All right. Okay. So we see that a hotel gives vouchers for meals to its employees, right? So looking at it, it's not a reward. A reward is given for something specifically to probably a task that was done, you know, you would tie a reward to those. So it's not a reward for something. It's not a bonus either because it's something continuous, right? And it's not, while it acts as a motivation, the strongest answer here is fringe benefit. It's an additional benefit to what you receive as your salary. So of course your salary is paid, and then you get these additional compensation. So it's really classified as a fringe benefit, right? And while we're at this, let me just clarify that in multiple choice, you have to look for some key terms. This form of incentive is best. And note that best is in bold. So when you see that term, it's possible that two answers are there that are very close. You're looking for the strongest of the two, right? So you have to pay attention to that as well. So sometimes you will have 2 close answers. And that is why I say to you that sometimes when you read a multiple choice question and you realize that the answer stands out, there's no question about it, you need to just put away that and move to others, because like this question, you're going to have 2 close answers. Motivation scheme, fringe benefit. These 2 are close, right? But the best, and this will take you a little time now, which one should I choose? Which one should I choose? This will take you a little time. So you need to maximize on your time. So for these questions, you can get a little bit more time to decide which is best, right? I noticed 2 persons talk about bonus. Bonus is normally given as a one-time payment at the end of a period, right? So probably at the end of a job or at the end of a certain period, you're given this sum of money, right? So it's not a continuous thing, right? The vouchers are given as part of their contract. right? They give vouchers for meals. So from the moment you are employed at this organization, you can get whether free lunch, breakfast, whatever it is, right? By getting the vouchers. So this is called a fringe benefit. It's a benefit for working there. All right. Hope it clarifies the response. Very good. All right. So we have D out front. All right. Two more to go. All right. Now we have types of production. And let us see if we briefly understand what we mean by types of production. You have primary production, which is also known as extractive production. This is where at this stage you basically gather the raw materials. So for example, if you are going to build some tables and chairs, what are the raw materials involved? You will have to cut the lumber, right? Those stuff that you need to gather as raw materials. Getting those are part of what we call the primary production, right? Secondary production now is where you actually start to make the product or make the product, right? So you have the lumber, just the lumber, put those items together. You call that the secondary production, right? Then the tertiary production, right, is where you offer service. You're not making anything at this point. So you gather the raw materials, you make the product. But after you make the product, the consumer needs to consume or use it. So between the product being made or a finished product, getting it and all the process involving getting it to the consumer is known as tertiary, right? So the selling, the marketing, all of those activities are involved in the tertiary production process, right? That's the exchange aspect of it. So after you finish making the product must be exchanged so that the consumer can utilize the product, right? And that is where the tertiary production comes in. Now let's look at the question at hand. John invests in a business buying fruits and earning money, right? He buys fruits, the business of buying and selling, of course, fruits to earn money. Now, in buying and selling of fruits, of course, is really a service he's providing. And any form of service that you provide is considered to be tertiary. All right? So that's the tertiary production. So he's really providing a service to persons who need. He's not engaging farming or making anything. He's simply exchanging, right? He obtains a product, finished product, and sells them. All right? So that's tertiary production. Okay. Last one. Okay. All right, so we have types of leaders. We have authoritarian leader, which is also, in some texts, they refer to it also as autocratic leader. You have democratic leader, you have charismatic leader, and you have the laissez-faire leader. Now, the authoritarian, or for this purpose of this question, the authoritarian leader, or let me go to the others first. The laissez-faire leader, similar to the laissez-faire system, is a free-for-all leader. So he allows those who he is supposed to be leading to do whatever they want to do. They have the freedom. He does not interfere in the process, right? So you'll find that there's little or no control over what takes place, right? The democratic leader is the one who is a mixture between autocratic, which is authoritarian as well, and the laissez-faire. It gives you some amount of leverage to decide. He solicits your input, but he also ensures that the final decision is made by him after considering the decisions or the suggestions from those who he leads, right? So persons have a say where democratic leadership is concerned. The authoritarian leader is the one now, or the autocratic leader is the one who just gives instruction. He makes all the plans, just like the planning economic system. That type of leader makes all the plans and gives it out. He does not solicit any suggestion or anything, no input from those who he lead, right? It's his way or the highway. That's how he operates, all right? Now, an authoritarian leader based on the question, and you can look at it now and see that the answer would be one who makes decision without consultation. He's also known in some texts as the autocratic leader, all right? So that's it for this. All right, so we have third place there with 926. We have second place with 14. And then we have the podium finish. All right, so, all right. And then there are others who did not participate this time around, but I know will another time around. All right, good. All right, so let me stop sharing here. All right. All right, so that was to break the monotony. All right, so the second short answer question we are going to be looking at is around teamwork, right? And it asks us to define, and since I'm going to be moving a little bit more quickly, since we would have established in the first question the verbs that we use and what is expected when certain verbs are used, and how we use the marks to guide us, right? So the second one asks us to define the term teamwork. And we want to see teamwork is the process of working closely with others to achieve a shared goal, right? Any idea along that line is accepted, right? And this again, you're defining, so it's 2 marks. all right? The process of working collaboratively to achieve same aim, same goal, a desired objective, those are acceptable, all right? Advantages of teamwork: improve morale as employees enjoy more responsibility. So when you're in an environment where, you're not the only person working on a task, sometimes it can help to build a positive mood. We call it morale, where you enjoy the work, so you can talk and discuss, and there's just a positive energy in the environment, right? So it improves the morale of employees and they enjoy more responsibility. So they are doing work and they're enjoying themselves, not even realizing that it's work. Team provides support. So sometimes someone might have a difficulty completing a task and somebody else is there that can manage it a little better or is more competent, and that person can assist in saying, no, this is the way, this is the best way to do it, and demonstrate. And then the person can gain competence from that sort of support. Tasks completed in economy of time, raising profits and productivity. So you take less time if the team is gelling together. When you have, there's a term we know, many hands make work light. So more persons on a task, once they are working together, it becomes less burdensome, right? And if you can complete that in a shorter time span, then what it means is that you will get more work done in the same time that you normally do. And with more work, that's greater productivity, and it also means greater profit. And that could lead to even some of the bonus that we were talking about in the previous question. You'll be realizing it, whether you're getting a bonus, some incentive, or whatever it is, all right? Disadvantage of teamwork: decision making can be slow, especially if you have two persons who are strong-willed and they are contending, they don't agree on a particular matter, then it could cause some derailment in the process. Conflict can arise between team members, right? Of course, when you have teamwork, there will be conflict at times. Team with strong working relationship may resist the goals of managers of the organization. So there are some places where workers unite and they will decide that, okay, we are not going to take this from the manager. And the manager decide that this is what we want to get done today. And they decide that, okay, well, you have to fire all of us. And they stand together. So teamwork is good, but you could find that if they want to come together for something that is negative, if you want to put it that way, whatever it is, they can also have that issue facing them, all right? So there's good and bad in teamwork. All right, so the next question, and that should suffice for 2 marks. Each advantage, again, is a mark. So depending on how much advantage you're asked to give, right? Definition, 2 marks, right? So pay attention. And remember, we say that each question values 20 marks, right? The next question here, outline 2 examples that show how teamwork is used in school or in workplace. Now, what I did was to just outline one of each, right? So group work can be used to complete coursework among students, right? So you have an assignment that is given and it is distributed to persons within a group, and each person completing a particular aspect of it to ensure that the coursework is done and it is submitted as one piece of work, right? So they meet and they distribute what the sections that each person must cover. And as a result, if it flows smoothly, then of course the work would be done in economy of time. Similarly, teamwork among employees can be used to complete a job ordered by customer, especially if there's a deadline. You don't want one person, a short deadline, you don't want one person to be burdened and they miss the deadline as a result. Because if you miss deadline, it could also mean that you lose the contract and you lose a customer as a result. So persons can come together to complete a task within a short time. A job that is ordered and a deadline is, let's say, tomorrow, and you ask quite a few persons to come and to complete this for the customer, right? So that also can be done. 2 marks each, right? So that would be 4 marks. For the next question, list 4, and if you're listing for each thing that you're asked to list is 1 mark. So the fact that you're listing 4, it means that you will get 4 marks. And it means, therefore, that if you're listing, we don't expect an essay for listing, right? 1 mark, you don't need more than a line if you are listing something. Some persons might be so inclined to put something onto just what they are listing, right? But you don't need more than a line, okay? So list 4 important elements in the communication process. Now, the communication process involves sender, right? And what the sender is sending is information, idea. The attitudes are part of the communication. And of course, most time there's a desired action that the person wants to communicate. They need a response. So the sender is one. Another one could be message. And the message is in 2 phases. So the person sending the message would encode it. So all the dynamics surrounding the message, the words that are used, or whether they use hyperbole, to express themselves in sending the message. All of that, the attitude, everything. And then the receiver, the person who is receiving, would decode, look at all the dynamics of the message coming in, and they would decode it. The medium, oral, written, what oral form could be a face-to-face, right? Written could be text, email, whatever. So you will look at the most appropriate medium to communicate that message. And of course, the recipient would receive, understand the message, and any action required. All right? So those would be part of the elements in the communication process, right? The next question asks is, using an example outline one. So you're using an example to outline one strategy for effective communication between each of the following, right? So I put here a few stuff that you could select from. So between the teacher and the student, you can decide on what mode best to communicate. You could decide on what is the intended message you want to communicate, right? You could emphasize feedback, ensure that the person understands what is being communicated. So for example, in a teacher-student setting, it could be a class meeting, or it could be simply teaching a lesson, right? So you would decide how you want to communicate this. Do you want to dramatize your lesson? Do you want to use a song and various activities? So you would select your mode. And at the end, you ensure that you get their feedback, that sort of thing. You're just asked to use an example and one strategy, right? So you want to ensure that at the end, though, whatever is communicated, at least you obtain feedback from the recipient and observe their response and respond accordingly. So if you realize that at the end of the process, the person did not get the message how you wanted them to receive it, then it means, therefore, that you might have to look at what interfered with the communication process, which we call noise. Was there a distraction? Was it that the mode of communication or medium was not the desired one? So you have to look at that. The teacher and parent, you also can look at the objective of the message. You want to also be sensitive to the needs and attitudes, right? So let's say you have a PTA meeting, or it's just a regular announcement that you want to communicate to. There's a class trip. There is some, practicum that the student need to go on, right? How you're going to communicate that. You could also, it might not be a face-to-face. You probably can establish a WhatsApp group, right? You can probably choose email, that sort of thing, right? So but whatever method you use, at the end of the day, what is critical is that there is feedback and that to ensure you clarify any misunderstanding and you respond accordingly. All right? So we would have covered those two questions there. I hope that we are clear. I am not able to, I know that there might be questions, but I am not seeing the chat from here. So, all right. All right. Finally, what I'm going to look at is question dealing with entrepreneur. Who's an entrepreneur? In other words, define the term entrepreneur, right? And definition, 2 marks. And I am emphasizing that we need to be precise. Don't overwrite, because overwriting can be to your demise, all right? And let it be sufficient as well. So this is someone who is willing and able to take the risk of setting up their own business enterprise, right? They can coordinate all factors of production. All factors meaning, ensure that all the machinery and capital is in place, ensure that the requisite labor force and personnel that they want to use is in place, and also the raw materials, natural resources, right? Ensure that all of these are in place. So they coordinate everything. State two advantages of being an entrepreneur. And before I go to that, note we say that the person must be willing. So the entrepreneur is both willing and able, because unless they actually start a business, they are not an entrepreneur. You can't be an entrepreneur just in your mind. You must undertake, right? You must start something. You take the risk and you set up a business enterprise, right? So you can talk as much and you could teach as much persons to become entrepreneur. If you have not taken any risk, you are not an entrepreneur, right? So just to clarify that part of it. So two advantages of being an entrepreneur: state two advantages, which means that you're only going to get 2 marks, because state is lower order, just as defined. Financial independence. Don't have to work for anybody. You have make your own money, right? Self-actualization. It's something that you would have set a goal that you want to become, independent. You don't want to be working for anybody, and now you are at this point. So self-actualization, right? You reach a goal. Increase income and control. That's another among others, right? So the person who is an entrepreneur earns more money than the person who works for others, right? So if you were working in the same business for somebody, you will earn less, because your income that you're earning is an expense to somebody else. And they are paying you to make profit. When you operate a business, you are seeking to make profit, and all the profit becomes yours, providing it's a sole trade, right? So you earn more. What you earn is your income. But if you work $20 or do $20 worth of work in an organization, you are not going to be paid $20, right? Because the person who employs you need to make something out of what you are doing. They can't employ you and you only contribute $20 to the organization and you get all of it. You're only going to get a fraction of what you contribute, because part of what you contribute, they must benefit from it, right? So it pays to be an entrepreneur, but it comes with risk. State two disadvantages of being an entrepreneur: risk of losing entire investment. That's not good news. Yes, you can, persons who are wealthy don't necessarily work for others. They have others working for them, right? But in that journey to becoming that person, you can lose everything that you have invested, right? So that's a possibility, which is bad news. The burden of planning. I need to get these persons to work. I need to find a machine to carry out this production. Where can I source additional capital, right? all of these planning and sourcing of funds, those are burden on the entrepreneur. So those can be some burdens that is not really desirable, right? So those should give you your 2 marks. Because of course you only need 2. And of course you could probably find others. Identify 4 characteristics of an entrepreneur. The persons who are entrepreneur, they are creative, right? Meaning that they should be able to see something and convert it into a business opportunity, right? I know that some of the most creative minds are in Jamaica. When you look at how some persons would have earned their money, right? I recall seeing even a simple situation where I am in the town sometimes and the heavy rain comes down and nobody can move. Everybody is sheltering and waiting for the rain to stop. And you see some persons just going the wholesale and they buy a set of umbrellas, the last money they might have on them, and they buy a set of umbrellas and they come and they sell it. And within that short space of time, they turn over the money that they have. Creative. Oh, nobody can move. You know, umbrella could work right here. And they, of course, they seize the opportunity and make. So entrepreneurs have to be creative, right? But know what we said, even with that creativity, sometimes you can miscalculate, right? Because, of course, I always look on the fact that, and it's not to be negative, but you have to balance the equation, knowing that what you're doing is you're taking risks, right? Which is one of the characteristics. You must be able to take calculated risk, right? If you go in there to buy the umbrella for persons to be able to move while the rain is falling, you should also be on the alert that if the rain stop falls just after you purchase the umbrella before you start selling, right, and the sun start to come back out, you might not be able to sell much, right? So know that it's risk. A risk is involved. Entrepreneurs should be flexible as well, right? Be able to adapt to people's taste and preference, right? That's how you make business. It's not about you. So it's not how you like a product that you're going to get it to the customer. It's how the customers like the product, right? Persistence. Yes, there are times when you have to adjust the product several times before you can get it right. That is also a part of business, right? They should be goal-oriented. So you should see the end result of a particular business venture. So you will not necessarily start making X amount of money today, but in, let's say, a year after the business has been set and it's floating, then you can say, okay, I will see such a return, all right? So these are some of the characteristics of an entrepreneur. Identify 2 problems faced by entrepreneur. Sourcing of capital can be an issue, right? Especially if you don't have, in some cases, collateral, right? Some persons you're going to source or borrow funds, they need something to hold on to in the event that you can't pay or repay, right? Misinformation on demand and supply. So if you anticipate or based on the feedback a feedback that you're giving about the demand for a product or even the supply of the product, if it was not founded on the correct information, you could end up in a lot of problem. You invest a lot of money and only to find out that the person didn't really inform you correctly, right? Or you did not do the necessary due diligence. You think it was this, and based on your analysis, you believe that it would be easy for you to obtain these. But when you reach in the middle of it, you realize that it's not so. Those misinformation can cost you a lot, all right? The legislative framework in which you operate can cause problems. So if you're going to operate in a business context where the laws that exist for that industry is strenuous, then it's going to be a problem for you to operate, right? So those are some of the problems that entrepreneurs can face. Finally, explain 2 ways, all right? And for each explanation, you're looking between 2 to 3 marks, right? 2 ways in which entrepreneurship benefits an economy, and I'm just outlining some here. Provides employment. Now, of course, each time a new business opens, of persons have to be employed in order to provide the goods and services required, right? So it provides employment. Increase disposable income. So persons who are working, who receive jobs, will receive an income, and they will be able to purchase their own things that they demand, goods and service, right? So they're able to have their own disposable income, right? With more businesses also, you have increased goods and services, more goods. The customers now have more choices with a new business opening, providing similar goods and services, or even providing goods and services, right? So you have increased goods and services as a result. Corporate citizenship is another contribution. So you have these businesses that sponsor events. They contribute to various projects within the area that they operate, right? You call that corporate citizenship, right? That's benefit to the economy. And also, you have increased revenue for the country, all right? And this increased revenue comes as a result of increased income tax. You also have, and the other taxes, along with the fact that depending on the type of business, they might have to also have corporation tax, right? So all of these provide increased revenue for the country, all right? Now, let me stop sharing here. All right, so we are certain that with this, we would have gotten a better idea of how we respond to some of these questions. And we want to sharpen our whole preparation process for the external exams coming up between April and I think the end of May, all right? What we want to do is to ensure that for the next marathon, we're going to be covering some more of these questions. And I am hoping that from this exercise and session this afternoon, we have a better idea of how we will be addressing the questions or approach to the exam, how we are going to be managing our time, right? And we would have been better positioned to do well, all right? I want to thank you for listening, for watching, and I hope that when we meet again, we can have a little bit more interaction so that I can also provide feedback on anything that needs clarification. Thank you very much for watching, and do have yourself a good rest of the day and a great weekend.